if you saw one person in a yoga class wearing these bangles, inevitably the 20 other people in the class would kind of take notice and it would pique their interest.
Welcome to Shopify Masters, a weekly podcast brought to you by Shopify, the easiest way to sell online and in person for a streamlined experience. Each week, we invite entrepreneurs like you to share what they've learned growing successful businesses. This is Shuang Essersham from Shopify, and this week I'm helping our host Felix Sia share a story from Natalie Holloway and Max Kislevitz, who are the life and business partners and founders of Bala. Their flagship product, Bala Bangles, are stylish weighted bands that can amplify just about any workout. Since launching in 2018, they've turned an idea on a napkin to a multi-million business. In this episode, you'll hear how the husband and wife team pitched on Shark Tank and had all the sharks vying to be their partner, how they received media coverage from notable publications like Vogue, Marie Claire, and Glamour, and how they're managing an influx of sales during COVID-19. Before our show, I wanted to chat about Shopify Ping. It's a free live chat app for Android and iOS devices. It even works on your iPad. Did you know that shoppers who use live chats are almost 3 times more likely to complete their purchase? With Shopify Ping, you can share products, exclusive discount codes, and help customers with their purchases instantly. For more information, visit shopify.com/chat. Welcome to the show, Natalie and Max.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, happy to be here.
I know that you guys have seen a lot of growth since launching just over 2 years ago, from Kickstarter to Shark Tank. Before we dive into all of that, can you tell us how the idea of Bala Bangles came to be?
It's a funny story in that it's kind of intertwined with Natalie and I and our early relationship. We had worked at an ad agency called 72 and Sunny in Los Angeles, working on kind of major brands like Starbucks and Google and Coors Light, I think was the last account I'd worked on. And it was really a quite intensive job, working kind of round the clock on a deadline-oriented business. So we ultimately decided to leave that company and traveled for about 8 months through Southeast Asia. And it was on that trip that we attended a yoga class that was kind of far more meditative than we'd hoped. And shortly after the class, we'd said, whatever happened to the wrist and ankle weights from the 1980s? And it was in that moment that we just started sketching the idea on a napkin, and the napkin eventually became a prototype, and the prototype eventually became Bala Bangles.
That's super awesome, because I think anyone who works out, we have seen those not so pretty ankle or wrist weights. So you guys have definitely created a stylish alternative. Even with your experience in advertising, how do you jump into product design, and how do you kind of get started on developing a product?
I mean, we basically just we didn't know at the outset how to do anything, like how to grow a business, how to do a prototype, any of that. But what we did know is we knew to figure out the next step. So we basically, advertising really teaches us to problem solve. So if we had a problem, like finding a manufacturer, we would just start Googling that problem, talking to people, talking to Max's family who's in the toy business. And from there, we just kind of figured out the next step and just kept taking steps.
How did you test to see there's consumers out there that also not only like the idea, but they're willing to also pay for this new product?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. We didn't necessarily know that folks would respond to it. We had this kind of theory and almost a hypothesis that if you saw one person in a yoga class wearing these bangles, inevitably the 20 other people in the class would kind of take notice and it would pique their interest. And then we extended that theory even further by saying it's likely that folks would take photos of themselves wearing these, in the context of coming from or going to a class-based workout. And so we didn't really know with any certainty that folks would take interest in it, but we did kind of theorize that if they did, it would kind of catch on over time, just by virtue of kind of the world we live in,
The
where
word
folks,
of mouth.
yeah, where folks are dressing up to go to the gym. So it felt like it was the right time and right approach for a product like this.
And I would say early on, that's where Kickstarter, I think we made the right decision by going to Kickstarter, because when we launched our Kickstarter, we had no idea if anybody would even be interested in the product, but it was a really great way to test the market. So I would say if your product has, like, if you just want to test the market, Kickstarter, Indiegogo, like those are great places to get your product out there, into these communities testing the product and kind of giving you feedback early on before you really like launch and dive all in.
And how far do you have to be within your product development when you do go into Kickstarter? Did you kind of already have samples and prototypes that are ready to go?
So we actually, when our Kickstarter, if you look at the photos, it's totally a different product than what we actually launched, because we launched like a very early prototype, and it just looks very different. It was so early on, we had not gone into production yet. So we launched with this like prototype. We had it in hand, but it was definitely not perfect. So we used the duration of the Kickstarter and like the production timeline that we gave the buyers on Kickstarter to really like perfect the product and do little tweaks. And up until like, I mean, we were making product tweaks until like a week before we started like receiving the product or something. So I would say it was like you can definitely launch with a prototype as long as you think that it will turn into a beautiful product at the end with some tweaks along the way.
And what about, communicating your idea to everyone online? It's your concept, but you kind of have to distill it into a short video, into images, and really give the value to those who are backing you and showcase like why this product needs to exist.
We sort of stumbled onto a product that everyone and their mother is familiar with, but there wasn't a good version of. If you remember the wrist and ankle weights from the 80s, they're made of neoprene, which it frankly absorbs sweat. So inevitably over time they start to smell. And the material is also kind of like loose and clunky on your wrist. So we sort of lucked out. I'd love to say we did it deliberately, but in finding a product that everyone was familiar with, but we're no longer using because of those deficiencies. And so that made it quite a bit easier for us to be able to communicate to folks online what these things were, because they already had a reference point. These are stylish wrist weights. We didn't need to explain what a wrist weight was. It wasn't the first time folks would be wearing a weight. It's just the best designed version, in 20 some odd years. So we had some advantages in terms of the product that we were trying to kind of bring to life in a new way.
And how many iterations until you guys found kind of the perfect setup with, your cast iron and also silicone that's recycled? What was that process like, going back and forth and finding that ideal design?
Yeah, it's, as Natalie mentioned earlier, the thing that advertising probably instilled in us the most is to embrace an iterative process. So the first version of something doesn't have to be great, so long as the last version is. And we just kept going, until we'd felt like it was perfect and it met kind of the standards we'd had in our own minds about how great and functional and beautifully designed this could be. And so we probably went through, I want to say, north of a dozen prototypes. In fact, even the use of cast iron was something that we'd used early, but then we discovered that cast iron is prone to having kind of bubbles in the metal, which leads to inconsistency in the weight. So now we're using stainless steel inserts in our design. So, it's that sort of iterative approach that is not specific to material or specific to design or colors or the closure we use, but it is kind of inclusive of all of those things.
Yeah, and I would add that we are always like evolving and perfecting the product. So it's like any little flaw that we see, we're working on perfecting, whether that's like increasing the elastic or the Velcro. So I would say we'll always be like making tiny tweaks to make it just ever so slightly better.
That's amazing. During this whole Kickstarter and launching the business, were you guys still working full time and having this idea run on the sidelines before jumping in full time?
Yeah, I mean, we bootstrapped for a long time. I quit my full-time job in advertising about a year ago, and that's when we had somebody full-time working on the business, which was me. Max just quit about 2 months ago.
At this point.
Yeah, at this point, 2 months ago. So we really bootstrapped for a long time, which really helped us with a lot of our like the values in the company and the way we like used our cash and our resources. So and our work ethic. So I'm glad that we bootstrapped the thing, but we definitely bootstrapped for a while.
Yeah, it's funny too because, you know, we've all seen those explosion of direct-to-consumer brands that seemingly overnight have $1 billion valuation, you know, the Caspers and kind of Aways of the world. You know, our approach was what we like to refer to as just kind of like sustainable growth. We were funding the next production run through the sales of the previous run. And so we hadn't taken on formal investment. And so inevitably you're just going to scale more slowly. But to Nat's point, you can kind of improve the product along the way. You can respond to market feedback. And so there is, you know, sure, we've not become $1 billion brand overnight, and that's awesome and exciting, but there is like a slow and steady wins the race kind of approach that has been really helpful for us.
Yeah, you guys are really building for the long term and kind of preparing for a marathon versus just like a sprint.
Totally.
Yeah.
We believe, you know, we're already designing new products that bring that kind of design sensibility to these otherwise utilitarian fitness accessories. So we believe that Bala is not specific to Bala Bangles, but Bala can be a long-term, you know, 5 to 10 year growth trajectory. And so it's not about selling, you know, sales overnight. It's a brand over time, I think is the cliche.
Nice. So after Kickstarter, you've met your goal. After that, what kind of steps did you guys take to grow a following and have a reach beyond the campaign?
So I would say we really, again, like our strategy was very like scrappy and bootstrappy. So we really leaned on, like, we didn't do Instagram ads or anything. We leaned on free resources. So we really worked on like building our Instagram and curating like a beautiful Instagram. And I would say, honestly, that's where a lot of like our early buyers found us. Like that's where Free People found us, which was one of our big breaks, I would say. And so we really worked on that and like maybe reaching out to press that we found online, or reaching out to micro or influencers and seeing if they wanted to test our product. Like really that's what we used early, because we didn't really have like marketing budgets and money to spend. So that's kind of what we did to facilitate growth early on and get our name out there.
Yeah, I would just add really quickly, I mean, for a product no one's ever seen before, there is just a inherent skepticism from a buyer of if it's worth spending money on. And I think that it's true of a consumer product, like a wearable weight, you know, but it's also true of a shampoo or consumable. You know, I mean, you need credibility through some sort of third party before people are going to say, yeah, that looks legit and is worth my hard-earned cash. And so things like getting a press mention or getting into a known retailer give you sort of instant credibility, and it's kind of that first domino to fall that essentially kickstarts sales and other retail relationships and other press mentions. And you know, we've just had this almost snowball effect of the very first retailers that found us, like Free People, ultimately snowballing into our having, you know, hundreds of retail relationships. So it's those first few that you really need to grind for. You know, and not to say we've stopped grinding, but those are the kind of critical relationships that give you credibility for a product people might not otherwise kind of buy into.
And you guys have press, you know, coverage from Vogue, Marie Claire, Glamour, and these are very impressive names, but how did you start reaching out? And what was the process like? Because I bet there's a lot of, you know, it's a numbers game. There's a lot of work that you guys had to put in to get those mentions.
Yeah, I mean, I think early on, we were living in New York at the time. I think we tried to leverage any sort of connection we had. Like, we definitely did some cold outreach. Like, I would go through a Shape magazine and look at the editor's name, find them on Instagram, DM them, see if they wanted a product. Like, we would really leverage our connections. So early on, I had a friend of a friend that knew an editor at Shape. So I asked for a meeting there, and then we went up to the Shape building and got a feature. And that was like one of our early features that then snowballed into other features. So I would say it's definitely a combo of like, you know, who do you know, and using those connections, also with like pick up a magazine and look at the editors and literally just reach out to them on Instagram. So that combo really helped us get press early on.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people think that once you put something online, the virality happens mostly online, but in reality, there's a lot of like hustling and hard work that happens offline, in person. So yeah, that's great to hear. So you mentioned Free People, which is a subsidiary of Urban Outfitters, and I know that you guys within Canada, we see you guys in Indigo and Chapters, also Goop, Gwyneth Paltrow's brand also carries you guys. So how do you start reaching out to wholesalers and getting their buy-in to carry your products?
So I think again that was a combo. It was, I think, you know, Free People, we lucked out. They found us on Instagram. That was amazing. But then, for example, like Bandier, I think Max or myself, we looked up the buyer. We found them on LinkedIn, sent them a message. So it was really just like same with Goop. I think we probably sent them a ton of messages and never got a response. But then one day, I think they ended up finding us. Then they reached out. So it was like a case by case basis. But early on, we were doing everything we could just to like find a buyer contact and send a cold email. And oftentimes we wouldn't get a response. But every now and then, like Bandier is huge for us. They responded and they bought the product. And that probably helped us get into a lot of the other retailers we're in. So I would say that's kind of how.
Yeah, it's sort of comparable to trying to find almost your first job. You know, I mean, you have your parents and family friends saying, you know, reach out to anyone and everyone you know, and then reach out to those people's network. And all of a sudden you find that you're connected to far more people than you'd otherwise kind of imagined. And you have to be as resourceful trying to get into a retailer or trying to have someone write something compelling about you as you would for your job, because in reality, at least for us, they're one and the same at this point, you know. So whatever we have to do to be able to have a meaningful conversation about how Bala might fit into a retailer's, you know, store we're gonna do that thing.
Yeah, and I would say the key there, if you have a great product and you know that all you need to do is get it in somebody's hands, like the key there is all we needed to do was get it in their hands. So we were really just like offering free samples. Here's a free gift. Because we knew once we got it in somebody's hand, they're like, wow, I want to buy this. So I think if you have a good product, get it in their hands, let them play with it, fall in love with it, and then the rest will follow.
And within these relationships, like how many would you say it was fully virtual? You just reached out, asked if you could send in a free sample, and then the relationship kind of developed online versus like the ones that you actually had to meet in person, showcase Bala, and then have that relationship develop?
I mean, most were definitely online. We happened to meet like the Shape editor I mentioned, and then also Bandier. I think I went in for a meeting, but other than that, everything was pretty much done online because Free People's in Philadelphia, so it's like that wasn't really happening. So most of our appointments were done just by phone, honestly, which is great.
Yeah, the one sort of important exception is we have attended quite a few trade shows, and so you can go, you know, there are trade shows for virtually any and every category, and so we went to those that had kind of a fashion sensibility more so than kind of a fitness-based trade show, because we'd felt like the product really does belong in more of a Free People than, you know, a hardcore kind of weightlifting enthusiast environment. It's not to say the product isn't additive there as well, but that was like our early kind of point of entry. And so we attended trade shows and met buyers there in real life that, you know, inevitably continued the conversation virtually. But you know, so it is a bit of a combo. You know, I think we deliberately kind of hedged our bets by reaching out to people on LinkedIn, but also attending trade shows.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of trade shows, how do you calculate the benefits of attending one? Because I think when you're just starting out and bootstrapping, it is a bit of an investment to go to those events.
Yeah, it's expensive. We literally would just have a spreadsheet after each one, and because basically they say that it's like 6 months post the show where you can see your full, and even longer than that, honestly, your full sales, because you may have met a Nordstrom buyer, but they actually aren't ready to buy until like a year after the show. So we would literally just have a spreadsheet, and every time we got a sale that came from that trade show directly, we entered it in, and we would track the cost versus like our profit, and if we were profitable, then we just kept going to shows. So we probably have been to like about 5 trade shows.
So it seems like a lot of the early growth is done organically, by building up an Instagram and also reaching out to people. At which point did you actually transition into like putting in ad dollars and having a bit of marketing budget?
It's funny because we haven't done that yet.
We still don't do that. It's horrible. We're going to soon.
Yeah, honestly, it's a question of bandwidth and resource. On the bandwidth side, we're a small team. We've just recently hired a few folks to help out. We were selling organically. So, for some businesses, actually making that early splash through that advertising investment is critical. For ours, we were kind of riding this wave of interest and enthusiasm from both retailers and direct-to-consumer folks, right? And then I guess on the resource side, our kind of critical challenge was inventory management. And so every dollar we'd make from selling a product, we would put back into the next production run to be able to service the demand for the product. So spending money on advertising to essentially promote products we would then not be able to afford to buy kind of didn't make sense for us. So we're now at a point where, through the Shark Tank investment, most kind of obviously, we have funds allocated to paid digital, inclusive of email marketing, Facebook and Instagram ads, etc., that it will be rolling out within the next couple months.
But I also think that's very refreshing to hear, just how you guys have organically built this. So speaking of Shark Tank, what motivated you guys to go on?
Well, essentially, I mean, Max always says this, but when you start any business, like everybody, your aunt, your mom, your friend, they're like, you should go on Shark Tank, especially if it's like a unique product. So everybody said that to us early on, but then one day, Max's family, basically his aunt or second mom, Nara, said, you guys really should go on Shark Tank. This is early on, and I was just motivated by her saying that, and so I sent them an email, you can apply via email. And so we did that, and then they got back to us, and we were in the running for season 10, and it was going to be our first few months in business. So we got up to where I think right before they were going to book our flights to LA, and essentially they told us that we were dropped off the list, and they don't really tell you why. So we were super bummed because it's a lot of work. But then, I don't know, 8 months later, we get a call from one of the producers saying, would you be interested in going on for season 11 or applying for season 11? We said, of course. So then we went ahead and applied for season 11 and then got chosen. But I mean, I think it's one of those things where if you have the opportunity, you're in the running for Shark Tank, it's just such a huge opportunity that you just go for it, especially if you're growing your brand, you have a story to tell. So to us, it was absolutely a no-brainer.
How do you even prep for a pitch on Shark Tank? Because I feel like there's a lot of spinning plates. You have to remember your story, the numbers, prep for different questions that might pop up.
I mean, you're prepping for the most intense test you've ever taken. And it's fun and it's exciting, but it's also admittedly terrifying, because the show is as portrayed when you're watching it from home. You walk down the tunnel and you confront these kind of mega investors that also have the kind of power of celebrity.
You get one shot.
And you get one shot to do it right. So, you prep accordingly. We wrote our pitch and practiced it no less than 1,000 times. And it might be a single word that you're changing. that just helps the flow and cadence of the pitch. So you'll change it. And after 1,000 times, you have it committed to memory. I could recite it now, but won't.
Yeah.
And what we also did was take that same approach for the Q&A and just kind of did a bunch of scenario planning. What happens if no sharks are interested? What happens if all of them are? What happens if they lowball us on the valuation? What happens if they give us a royalty deal, which Mr. Wonderful loves to do. So having watched every episode of Shark Tank at least twice, we could start to piece together the questions we thought they might ask, and then also just kind of exhaustively listed all the other questions they could potentially ask, just so that we were prepared.
Yeah.
So we just took it really, really seriously because, again, it's kind of the most important test of our lives, at least.
Yeah, and I would say that basically, I mean, obviously we watched every episode and wrote down every question and kind of rehearsed with each other. But another thing that really helped us prepare right before the show is we had friends and family come over and pretend to be the sharks and be a panel. And they would just give us a hard time and we'd get flustered. And it was really helpful, I think, to do that role playing Shark Tank experience, the night before the show, 2 nights before the show. And that way we were really prepared and with other people actually testing us.
Those are some great friends. Also, I feel like it's very serendipitous because you guys ended up being on the episode with the guest shark, Maria Sharapova. So it's perfect having an athlete investor and then also having, the 5 sharks kind of fight over you guys. What was that feeling like? Because I remember seeing you guys kind of whisper to each other during that period. What were you guys saying to each other at that point?
It was extremely surreal and overwhelming because, I mean, you have to go in there thinking that they could pick you apart, and that's fine too because they do that they're sharks. So for all of them to be in, we could not believe it. I mean, I had a dream the night before that Mark and Maria, the people we wanted, actually wanted us, and it came true. So that was awesome. But basically, I mean, it was really crazy, surreal, overwhelming feeling.
It's funny, if you've watched enough Shark Tank, you've seen businesses that you think are really interesting and compelling not do all that well in the tank. And similarly, you've seen businesses that you don't think are all that interesting do really well. And so you really can't predict how things are going to unfold. Mm-hmm. We had confidence in the product idea and we'd had sales to kind of validate at least the market interest in it. And so, we'd felt good about our business and brand, but you have no idea if they'll ultimately take issue with it and feel the same way. So it was the most surreal experience of my life to have, 5 sharks that I'd watched for 10 years on TV, if not longer, for, Maria Sharapova has been a tennis icon for the last 20 years. It was the most surreal experience imaginable.
And I think I was whispering, because you asked what I was whispering. I think I was whispering a lot of things, but one of the main things toward the end was take the deal, because I really wanted him to take the deal with Mark and Maria. But it's what you don't necessarily understand is they're having conversations amongst themselves while you're standing up there at points. They obviously were having a bit of a dialogue, so we took those moments to try to connect with one another and make sense of how we wanted to handle this, because you're on the spot and you're making huge commitments based on the company you've worked on for thousands and thousands of hours. So it's a really high stress situation, but obviously it played out really well for us.
And now, how's life after the episode has aired, and what are you guys doing to kind of meet this exponential growth in demand, essentially?
Yeah, it's interesting because our episode aired on February 28th, and it was only a few short weeks later that folks started sheltering in place in light of kind of the global pandemic. And interestingly, we did see kind of an uptick in Bala as a result of folks trying to stay fit while staying home. So we kind of had this 1-2 punch of the exposure associated with Shark Tank and then interest in fitness products, not exclusive to Bala, but inclusive of Bala, kind of, all over the world. And so we did everything we could to service that demand and are kind of continuing to do so. We eventually ran out of product, frankly. And so, we'd started offering pre-orders on our site to get folks product as quickly as we possibly could. But yeah, it's kind of, could never have anticipated that interest and demand associated with Shark Tank, and then kind of a second wave associated with the pandemic.
So we've been doing pre-orders, but then we've also been posting like free workouts to our website. We have a workout section, and then doing like Instagram workouts as well to just like keep the community engaged and also give our community something, even though they can't buy our product necessarily right now. So that's a way we've been trying to like keep up with like the demand and stuff like that.
So have you guys faced some of the logistics and shipping restraints with COVID-19, especially with like working with manufacturers and then also meeting the demands of not just your consumers, but also maybe some of the wholesalers as well? Yeah,
navigating those challenges is kind of new to all of us, right? Because this is unprecedented. Thankfully, we have a really strong relationship with our manufacturing partner in China. And so we were able to be really communicative with one another throughout the process. And because China, started to recover as it was really hitting the US, like we were just trying to be transparent with one another about the lead times necessary to produce and deliver product. And so everything is happening more slowly, but because we are armed with the information about those timelines, we can, be communicative with customers on when a pre-order is likely to come through. So, the logistics have gotten harder and more complicated, but we've just tried to be as kind of open and honest and communicative with both our suppliers and our customers about, kind of navigating those delays. And I would say on the retail side, it's the same situation. Retailers are looking to us for clear and accurate timelines on when product can arrive, and we've had to have some hard conversations around those delays, but they're necessary ones.
You mentioned, at-home workout equipment is one of the categories that does see a growth during this time. How has that been like navigating that? Because I know that it's hard to see maybe friends who are going through a tough time or business going through a tough time, and you're trying to be helpful and also manage your own set of challenges that you've essentially never dealt with before.
It's been a strange thing because, the broader circumstances are obviously horrific, right? And so what we've done as a brand is try to add value to people's lives by doing Instagram live workouts with trainers that we know, and also sort of fast tracking an effort to create Bala-fueled workouts, and we've put those up for free on our website. So basically giving people an outlet, not just by using Bala products, you're welcome to come to the site whether or not you've purchased Bala, but giving them a workout that can, help them keep moving while at home. So, I think as a brand, you have to be realistic about the value you can bring to people's lives in a particularly kind of terrible situation like this one. And for us, that meant, providing a resource for people to continue to work out while at home.
And that's also offering people a sense of normalcy and routine to just kind of like give a little bit of distraction from everything else that's happening in their days.
Totally.
For sure.
So you mentioned that you have a really great relationship with the manufacturer that you have now. What was that process like, finding that one manufacturer? Did you guys go through a whole bunch? And how do you work with someone who's, on the other side of the world?
Yeah, I would say, early on, we found the manufacturer because Max's family is in the toy business. So we asked around like his dad and his uncles and got a random contact at a factory that might be able to help us. So he helped us with our first few runs. But then the factory that we're using now was actually a guy who reached out to us on Kickstarter, and he just was so persistent. He kept reaching out, and eventually we gave him a chance, and he is the best partner, him and his factory. I mean, we love working with them. It is interesting because like our days start at different times, obviously, but we're really like the way we work together is just we're always in communication. I mean, we're always like texting or emailing all day and night, and really just being really close partners. And that's the way we work together. I mean, we went overseas before our first production run to see the factory and make sure everything was good. And we were going to be doing that right about now, but obviously COVID happened. So I think the way we work with them really is just like close communication, because you really can do everything online these days and be texting and calling. And so we just stay really close lockstep to get the production perfect.
That's so cool to know that, Kickstarter not only helped you guys validate this idea, get customers, but it also got you a supplier.
Yeah, I know. It's really crazy.
Totally. Honestly, it's also smart on the supplier end, because I think what they do fairly methodically is monitor Kickstarter. And when, a project is funded and the authors of that project aren't necessarily familiar with production, they can come in and say, we can produce this for you rather simply. So, to Natalie's point, kind of treating our suppliers as partners rather than, vendors has just gone a long way for us to kind of co-develop new products together, to make those incremental improvements to the existing products, and, to explore things that we wouldn't otherwise even know were possible.
That's awesome. I also wanted to talk about your content, which is editorialized, beautiful, and at which point did you decide, this is the direction we're going to go versus kind of a more hardcore workout focus? It's more fashionable, and I feel like, I don't know, I just really love how you guys have approached it.
That's really sweet. Thank you. We basically, like, early on, we were entering the fitness market, and we thought, how could we differentiate, like, from a branding perspective, aside from product, how could we differentiate ourselves so that we look different than any other like legging activewear brand out there? And we thought that would be by doing like a little bit of like more of the fashionable tilt, almost like ridiculous. Like some of our photos are ridiculous and not fitness at all. And so we thought that would be like our entry into the market, and that would be what we could own. So early on, that was our strategy. And we had our like brand director, who is my sister, does all of our content, and she honestly just has such an amazing eye, and she's really good. We all collab on the photo shoots, but she really drives the content, and that was like always her vision too, which really helped early on. And we were just like very clear that we didn't want to like put anything out that was basic. We wanted it to be like just fashion forward and so not fitnessy. I mean, every now and then, of course, we'll put out some fitnessy content, but we wanted it to be more editorial and unique and just like kind of different. Like, why is that a fitness brand?
Yeah, and Bala does sit at this interesting intersection between fashion and fitness. And, it's a fitness product with fitness benefits, but, this idea that the person you are in your everyday life is different than the person you are when you go to the gym. Like, one can be really fashionable and considered, and the other is all about being hardcore. It's just a division that didn't really make much sense to us. So we're treating a fitness product as part of your fashionable life. And, fashion is awesome in that it's unapologetic and can be absurd and still feel powerful and kind of like energetic almost. So it's been a really kind of like really like gratifying approach to the product to be able to just like challenge some of the norms we've all come to accept around the fitness space.
It's very refreshing. I can see why free people would notice you guys, because it is just so different from all the other fitness Instagram content that you see.
Well, thank you. That's very nice.
No worries. Speaking of your sister, I know that your team is actually quite small. Was that a conscious decision to keep your team kind of lean instead of like expanding and having more staff?
We like, I think everything goes back to like the way we bootstrapped, and we are so lean, even to the point where Erica, my sister, was hired before Max came on full time a month ago, you know? So it was like, I think that's just like ingrained in our brain to be lean and try to always be as lean as possible. But recently we have grown our team a little bit. We have a head of sales. We've hired my other sister, Jessica, to do customer service and sales. And then we also have Erica, the other sister. So we're a team of 5 right now. And I will probably, by the end of the year, could grow by a few people. So we try to outsource as many things as we can. So whenever we do run digital ads, we'll be outsourcing that to a guy we know versus like bringing somebody in-house. So as much as we can outsource to operate lean, we will. But when there becomes a need for an in-house person, that's when we decide, okay, it's time to bring another person on, essentially.
Yeah, and I would add, I mean, it's funny, we have friends that have started businesses by raising money first, and then they're able to hire up with that cash, and all of a sudden, almost overnight, you have a team of 10 that is like fully functional, and you know all your disciplines are covered. And you know, as Natalie mentioned, we've just taken a different kind of grassroots approach on all these elements of the business. So we're kind of scaling relative to need, as opposed to just building a team and then trying to scale from there. So it's not to say any one approach is better than the other, but just based on the kind of genesis of our company, it's made sense to do it this way.
So you guys being life and business partners, at what point did you realize, you know, we can actually work together and we actually complement each other very well in a business setting?
Yeah, you know, it's funny. It's not something that's as simple as kind of writing roles and responsibilities on a piece of paper. You do over time learn one another's strengths in a business setting, and it's not a real linear process, but because we are life and business partners, you know, we figured it out over months and years about what each of us should own, and then kind of allowing the other person to own that thing. So Natalie kind of owns the supply chain and those logistics, whereas I'm kind of more in the like product development space amongst many other things. You know, we each wear about 15 different hats, but yeah, it's not something that I think either one of us would say is like easy to navigate, but you do figure it out over time, and thankfully we're now in a place where we understand what each of us brings to the table, and we've kind of chopped up roles and responsibilities accordingly.
And for like other couples who might think about venturing into this dual professional personal life, what would you say is like one thing that you guys really cherish to make sure like there is a balance between personal and professional life?
I mean, that's definitely hard, especially when you're running a business that is like a lean team and growing fast. It's kind of like you're always working, but we try to do like, lately we'll do things like, I mean, it's all different now that COVID's happening and we're all shelter in place, but we'll do like, we have to work at least one of the weekend days, but maybe we'll do like Sunday off. And so it's like, we try to just like not talk about work and go enjoy each other. Or maybe it's like we take the full weekend off, and maybe we just like have a concise meeting like from 11 to 12 in the morning, and then are not working the rest of the day, and we're just like enjoying each other. So we try to do that, or we'll go on like dinner dates and we'll be like, let's not talk about work, which never really happens. But I would say like that's kind of how we do it. I don't know.
Yeah, to the extent that it's possible to create separation between church and state, like that's hard. That's the intent, is to create some boundaries for the business and some boundaries for our own personal lives. Admittedly, they're basically one and the same, so it can be hard to do that. You know, I suppose the other thing that is it's not all that deep, but like to the extent that you can, just keep it fun. You know, I mean, yeah. There's going to be days where things are really, really stressful, and, you know, throw on some music and just get it done. I mean, you know, there's no real alternative. You can embrace the stress, or you can just kind of rise above it. And so when things have been at their worst in terms of like logistics and the kind of daily challenges of running a business, we have tried to flip the switch and make it as fun as possible.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. And I noticed that you guys now have a bit of apparel and there's sliders in addition to the bangles. What else are you guys exploring right now? And what are some new things you guys want to tackle?
I'm like passionate about this particular question. I think what we have stumbled on with the Bala bangles is that we now live in this world where people are dressing up to go to the gym. And when they get to the gym, the products they are interacting with while there are sort of under-designed. It's this weird tension of beautiful people going to a not so beautiful space. And so, we are actively trying to bring design to fitness products and accessories that might not otherwise have seen much innovation in, years or decades. So I don't think we're prepared to say specifically the kinds of things, because we're launching some new products in June, but it's basically bringing a design sensibility to these otherwise kind of utilitarian products that is our product development strategy.
Yeah, so we have like 2 really exciting products coming, as Max mentioned, in June. But I would say our products are basically, we want anything we ever put out, we want it to like inspire movement. So you see it and you want to like move with it, or just like incorporate it into your everyday life. So yeah, that's what we can say there. But yeah, stay tuned for some fun stuff in June.
That's exciting. I'm excited to see like the Bala flair within like all aspects of the gym. I feel like you guys like acknowledge that you don't know certain things and you go for it anyways. How do you take that realization to say, I don't know this, but I'm going to chase this idea anyways?
I think we've like actually like learned that along the way. So early on, it's like even just, the back end of Amazon, anyone who sells on Amazon knows it can be a beast and really challenging. And you have to watch these like 30-minute tutorial videos to set up your products and add inventory and just deal with drama on Amazon. So that's an example where it's like, okay, well then we figured that out. So then it kind of gives you confidence to figure the next hurdle that comes your way out. So I think early on, by just honestly just doing it rather than having it on your to-do list, like there was a sense of like peace when you did figure it out, and it kind of gave us confidence to then go do that with another challenge.
Awesome. That's great to hear. Well, thank you so much, Max and Natalie, for chatting with us. I'm excited for the new product launches for you guys.
Yes, thank you. It was so great chatting with you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Shopify Masters. My name is Shuang Aster Shan. I would love to hear what you thought about this episode, so please leave a review wherever you are listening. Next week, Felix is back with another interesting conversation with a Shopify merchant, so please stay tuned for that. Until next time.